All right. How's everyone doing today? Today we are going to start a new book, A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. A few days ago we just finished 1984 by George Orwell. And I guess in some ways this is a similar story. It's a kind of a negative view about the future. And people say that it portrays many things very accurately about how we live today. I don't know. I'm not really familiar with this story. This is my first time going through it, so it's a first for me and maybe a first for you. We're not just going to read the story like a regular book, because the purpose of doing this is to talk about interesting advanced English vocabulary or interesting phrases that you might not be familiar with or maybe confuse you. If you're watching this live with me, then I really do want you to make comments and ask questions as we go, because that's the whole point of the video, and it makes it much more interesting. If you don't ask questions, I will just pick out phrases or select phrases that I think you probably don't know, or words that you probably don't know, and talk about them. So, all right, let's get started with Chapter 1 of A Brave New World. A squat gray building of only 34 stories. Over the main entrance, the words Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Center. And in a shield with the World State's motto, Community, Identity, and Stability. Okay, well, right from the beginning we have some interesting words in the first paragraph. I've seen this word squat being used before to mean, I'll check the definition in a minute, but first let me show you what squat usually means. It's usually, let me show you a picture. It's usually this position when you sit, when you bend your knees and you lower yourself to the floor. That is how you would normally see the word squatting. But the way they're using it here is an adjective, and I just want to look up the meaning. It's not something that I really have ever used. I've seen people use it, but I couldn't tell you a really good definition, so let me just check. Very short and thick. As an adjective, squat describes someone who is very short and thick. So they're describing a building as being a squat building of only 34 stories. So I guess what we can imagine by that, if part of what squat means is that it's short, all of the other buildings must be very tall. Because 34 stories, by the way, means floors. So a one-story house has only one floor, a two-story house has two floors, like that. So this is saying it's a very small building because it only has 34 floors. So we can imagine it must be the buildings must be extremely tall. Over the main entrance, the words Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Center. Let's take a look at the word hatch for a minute. That's a verb. Let me show you what I think of when I think of the word hatch. Here's a good picture. Hatching is how birds are born. So this bird is hatching out of an egg. But you can use hatch in many ways, like hatch an idea or hatch a plan. That means like you imagine the egg exploding in your head and suddenly a plan is born or an idea is born, just like this chicken or bird. So it seems like an unusual word. Why would I ever need to know how a chicken or how a bird is born out of an egg? But you can use it. It's very commonly used for hatching an idea. It's like creating an idea. Or hatching a plan is like creating a plan. A plan appears out of the egg. Maybe the egg is your brain. I don't know. Okay. So, if they're calling this building a hatchery, what do you think must happen there? Things are born there. Things are born there. So in this building, the London Hatchery, things are born there probably. We'll find out, I guess, in a little bit. And conditioning. Now, I'm not sure. Conditioning could mean several different things. One of the ways it's used quite a bit is in psychology it's a process to help you change your behavior. When you condition someone, you expose them to something either positive or negative to make them change their behavior or make them feel a certain way. So just judging by the title of this building, the London Hatchery and Conditioning Center, I imagine things are born there, and also they try to change people's behavior there. That's what I understand from that. I could be wrong because I'm not really very familiar with this story. We'll find out. Okay, in a shield, the world states... Oh my god, my voice today. I'm sorry, 1 second. Okay, let's try that again. In a shield, the world state's motto. A shield, maybe you know that word, shield. Probably. It's not such an advanced word. So let's take a look at what a shield is. Here's a good picture of a shield. Here's a shield. That's a shield. But if you think about old buildings especially, I think this was written in the 30s. I think they still did this quite a bit. No, they don't show it. Let me see. Well, unfortunately, I don't see very many pictures, but in older buildings, you would see something like a shield shape, and maybe it would say the name of the building on the shield or the year the building was created. That was very common in older buildings. So that's pretty easy for me to imagine. I don't know about for you, but it's pretty easy. So a squat gray building, so very short and fat gray building of 34 stories. Over the main entrance, the words Central London Hatchery and Condition. So things are born there, and maybe they change behavior there. And in a shield, the world's state motto. A motto is like a phrase that represents your ideas. So the world state's motto is community, identity, and stability. The enormous room on the ground floor faced towards the north, cold for all the summer beyond the panes. We had that word panes in 1984. Someone asked me, what is pain? What does that mean? And this is not P-A-I-N, this is P-A-N-E, which is how you count sheets of glass. So a window pane is the sheet of glass that covers the window. In other words, just the window. Cold from all of the summer beyond the panes, so on the other side of the glass, on the other side of the window. For all the tropical heat of the room itself, a harsh, thin light glared through the windows. Harsh means intense or extreme, always in a bad way. So if it's a harsh light, it's very intense, it's very extreme. Hungrily seeking some draped lay figure, some pallid shape of academic goose flesh, but finding only the glass and nickel with a bleakly shining porcelain of a laboratory. Well, this author uses some interesting words. I can tell this is going to be a long book. Okay, let's go back over that. Cold for all the summer beyond the panes, for all the tropical heat of the room itself, A harsh, thin light glared through the windows, hungrily seeking some draped lay figure. So it's saying the light is looking for something to shine on, I guess. That's how it seems. Some pallid shape of academic goose flesh. Well, let's take a look at the word pallid. I'm not really sure what he means by that sentence, to be honest with you. Pallid. Let's check the word pallid. These are not common words. Well, it comes from the word pale, which means like no color in your face, like maybe you look sick. So pale is an adjective. Pallid is also an adjective, typically because of poor health. Feeble, insipid. I'm not sure what they mean by academic goose flesh. Flesh is meat. So this is your flesh is your body. Not the skeleton part, but the meat part. That's flesh. Why goose flesh? I'm not sure. Maybe because geese have those little pricks all over their bodies if you take their feathers. So maybe they're saying that the light was looking to shine on someone, but that someone would be academic and sick looking. I don't know. Okay, shining. Wait, let's see. But finding only the glass and nickel and bleakly shining porcelain of a laboratory. So we're in a laboratory. That's where scientists work. And nickel is a type of metal. So it looks like steel or something like that. It's like a silver-colored metal. Only finding glass and nickel and bleakly shining porcelain of a laboratory. That word bleak to me kind of means like no hope. But let's check the definition. Bleak, lacking vegetation and exposed to the elements. Charmless. If they're talking about a room, charmless, inhospitable, dreary. So if a room looks bleak, it doesn't look very warm or nice or comfortable. And you could imagine that for a laboratory. There's no feeling in it. It's just metal beds or metal tables and sinks and equipment. It doesn't give you any love. No hope. Oh, we've got Still Waters here today. Hi, Still Waters. How are you doing today? Okay. So, but finding only the glass and nickel and bleakly shining porcelain of a laboratory. So if you go into a laboratory and you see all of the equipment, it's all very clean and nice, but there's no love coming from it. There's no warmth. So it gives you a bad feeling, a feeling of no hope. I stand by my bleak means no hope. Wintriness responded to wintriness. The overalls of the workers were white, their hands were gloved with a pale, corpse-colored rubber. The light was frozen, dead, a ghost, only from the yellow barrels of the microscope did it borrow a certain rich and living substance. Wow, you can really tell the difference between Orwell's style of writing and Huxley's style of writing right from the beginning. I think Huxley is more complicated to understand. Wintriness responded to wintriness. The overalls of the workers were white, their hands gloved with a pale corpse-colored rubber. Corpse is the word that you use to mean dead body. So the rubber was the color of a dead body. The light was frozen and dead, a ghost. Only from the yellow barrels. I just want to show you a picture of what a barrel is. These are barrels. This is what a barrel is. Barrel. And I think you could use that to describe anything with a similar shape if you wanted to, or at least that's what he's doing here. Because, well, let me get a picture of a microscope. Oh, they named the parts of the microscope, so maybe it really is called a barrel. Let's see. Oh, I can't read that. But what part do you think the barrel could be? I guess it could be the one going down. I don't really know microscope vocabulary. But that's what I imagine. That shape. Only from the yellow barrels of the microscope did it borrow a certain rich and living substance, lying along the polished tubes like butter, streak after luscious streak, and a long recession down the work tables. So I think he's describing many, many microscopes down a long table. A streak is a line, a type of line. So streak after streak after streak, I imagine the barrels of the microscopes. And this, said the director, opening the door, is the fertilizing room. If you don't know what fertilizing is, that's when you give something, or you put two things together to make something grow. It's like food. If you're fertilizing an egg, remember we were talking about a hatchery. You have the female egg, and then you have the sperm, and when they meet and connect, that's fertilization. So I think they're making babies in this room, is what I think is happening, but I don't know. Okay, bent over their instruments, 300 fertilizers were plunged. Plunge is like go down, but it could also be like let me show you a picture of something. Plunge is when something goes down very quickly. And so if you're talking about this is a needle, a hypodermic needle. When you do this motion, when you press down and make the needle go down, that's plunging the needle. It's what you do with your finger. So I think you have these scientists at tables with microscopes and needles, because he's talking about plunging down. I think they're fertilizing eggs so that something will grow. We'll read back over that. Bent over instruments. So bent is when you're like this, when you move in this motion. Bent over instruments, so you can see them looking down the barrel of the microscope and then plunging the needle. As the director of hatcheries and conditioning entered the room, in the scarcely breathing silence, an absent-minded, soliloquizing hum or whistle of absorbed concentration. A troop of newly arrived students, very young, pink and callow, followed nervously, rather abjectly. Wow, this is filled with unusual vocabulary. Let's look at callow. These are not words that you could use in everyday speech. People, I think, would be confused about what you're talking if you use this. Experienced and immature, callow. Stillwater says, I learned an idiom, scrape the bottom of the barrel. Yes, scrape the bottom of the barrel is commonly used. If you imagine the picture of the barrel, that used to be before refrigeration, maybe 120 or 130 years ago. If you went to the grocery store, many things were kept in barrels, like pickles or eggs or something like that. And that's you would take your groceries from this and buy it. So scraping the bottom of the barrel, if you think about it, all of the fresh, nice things are on top. And all of the things that people didn't want, when you get to the bottom of the barrel, those are all the things that you didn't want, the rejects. So when you scrape the bottom of the barrel, you're taking the worst of something. Mumto Zakson. Is that how you say your name? Mumto Zakson says hello. Hi Mumto Zakson. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Let's see. Very young, pink, and callow. Callow means inexperienced or immature, but it's not a common word. I wouldn't encourage you to use that in your daily vocabulary. Followed nervously, rather abjectly. Abject, let's define that. That is a word that you'll see sometimes. That means complete, I think. Something present to the maximum degree. So if they're following abjectly, they are, somebody is leading them and they aren't distracted. They're just following that person 100%. Maybe not looking around. Maybe their attention is on the leader. Each of them carried a notebook in which, whenever the great man spoke, he desperately scribbled. We've had that word before, scribble. Hadi, are you here? Do you remember that word if you're here? Let's see. Scribble is very unorganized writing. So if you ask a child to draw a picture, they would draw something like this. It isn't anything, they're just scribbles. Let's see. And sometimes if someone writes very badly, it's difficult to read what they're writing. We'll call them scribbles. So, you can't really read this. Somebody's trying to write, but they're not doing a very good job. Doctors are famous for scribbling their instructions and their prescriptions. Here, I think it just means that he's writing, but it's a more interesting way of saying he's writing. Each of them carried a notebook in which, whenever the great man spoke, he desperately scribbled. So you can just picture him writing. Straight from the horse's mouth. It was a rare privilege. Speaking of expressions like scraping the bottom of the barrel, we have straight from the horse's mouth. And this means hearing it directly from the origin. So, I heard a rumor that, let's see, the president will quit. Where did you hear that? Straight from the horse's mouth. That means the president told you. Straight from the origin of it. The biggest authority. So whoever this person is who's talking, he's very important, and people are writing his words because they're getting information straight from the horse's mouth, directly from the origin of the information. And usually it's a high person, an authority, something like that. Someone connected to whatever he's talking about. Let's see what they're talking about. It was a rare privilege. The DHC for Central London always made a point of personally conducting his new students round the various departments. You might have seen the word conducting in several different ways. Here it's being used to mean he's leading them. He's taking them from place to place. When you conduct a tour or conduct someone on a tour, you are just taking them. You're leading them from one place to another place to another place. And that's what's happening here. The DHC for Central London always made a point of personally conducting his new students, giving them a tour around the various departments. Just to give you a general idea, he would explain to them, for of course some sort of general idea they must have, if they were to do their work intelligently, though as little of one, if they were to be good and happy members of society as possible. I better read that again. There's something about that. For of course, some sort of general idea they must have if they were to do their work intelligently, though as little of one, if they were to be good and happy members of society. This is pretty complicated language, but I think what it means is it was important to make the students learn and understand everything, because if you learn and understand everything, even if you are just one person, this will make society better. That's my interpretation. Let's see. If they were to be good and happy members of society as possible. For particulars, as everyone knows, make for virtue and happiness. Generalities are intellectually necessary evils. For particulars, as everyone knows, make for virtue and happiness. So if you know the details of something, you'll be a better person and you'll be happier. And generalities, not giving the details, only knowing the summary, are intellectually necessary evils. I'm not sure what he's talking about, but what he's saying is when you know the details, it's much better than if you only know the general idea. But sometimes when you call something a necessary evil, that means that you know it's bad, but you have to do it. So he's saying generalities are necessary evils. That's actually a pretty useful expression, and I think I'm not writing down a lot of phrases because I have so many videos and phrases to already do, but I like necessary evil. So I'm just going to make a note that I should do a video about that. Necessary evil. That means you know it's bad, you know it's a bad thing, but you have to do it for some good purpose. So generalities are a necessary evil. You have to talk about generalities because it's impossible to always give the details, even though it's bad to think in terms of generalities. Okay. Not philosophers, but fret sawyers and stamp collectors compose the backbone of society. What is a fret sawyer? I have no idea. Wait, let me see. Fret sawyer. One who cuts with a fret saw. Oh, sawer. Well, I guess maybe sawer isn't a word. Maybe it's Sawyer. That's a popular last name, Sawyer. Let me show you a picture. So people who construct, people who build things. This is not a word that you would have to know now, but this is a saw. And the sharp part, this part here, is probably the frets, the teeth. And so this line is kind of interesting. Not philosophers, but fret sawyers, people who build things, and stamp collectors compose the backbone of the society. The backbone of something is the main part, the part that holds everything together. So, this is your backbone. The backbone of society means the people who hold society together. So he's saying it's not philosophers, but workers and people with interests who hold the backbone of society, who compose the backbone of society. Tomorrow, he would add, smiling at them with a slight menacing geniality. Menacing is something, it's kind of a synonym for threatening. So when you see something menacing, you get a bad, scared feeling. The man with the knife was menacing on the corner. I mean, you can see him and you feel very scared. You feel a lot of fear. So, and geniality means friendliness. So if he's smiling with menacing geniality, he looks a little bit friendly, but there's something scary about him. Wait, what did he say? Tomorrow, he would add, smiling at them with menacing geniality, you will be settling down to serious work. You won't have time for generalities. Meanwhile, so it sounds like tomorrow they will start their work, whatever that is, and they should be a little bit scared. He knows what's going to happen. That's why he's smiling. But there's some fear in that smile. Meanwhile, it was a privilege, straight from the horse's mouth into the notebook. The boys scribbled like mad. Tall and rather thin but upright, the director advanced into the room. He had a long chin and a big, rather prominent teeth. Prominent in this sense means like very noticeable, easy to see. So when you look at his face, maybe the first thing you see are his teeth. They're very prominent, very noticeable. He had a long, big, rather prominent teeth, just covered, when he was not talking, by his full, floridly curved lips. Let's look at that word florid. Again, these are not common words. You shouldn't spend a lot of time trying to memorize a word like this. Florid, having a red or flushed complexion. So his lips must have been very red. But it says floridly curved lips. Let's see, was there another way of using that? Elaborately or excessively intricate. Oh, okay. So he didn't have boring lips. He had very shapely lips with a lot of shape. Old, young, 30, 50, 55, it was hard to say. And anyhow, the question didn't arise. In this year of stability, AF 632, it didn't occur to you to ask it. I shall begin at the beginning, said the DHC, and the more zealous students recorded his intention in their notebooks. Zealous means, I know what it means, but I can't explain it to you. This is kind of a common word. It means like someone who believes 100% of something, or who lives 100% of something, showing great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or object. So it means like being very enthusiastic. But to me, it always sounds like a negative word. I don't recall hearing that word too much in very positive ways. I guess you could. It doesn't say that it's a negative word, but usually when you say that someone's zealous, it seems kind of extreme. Like maybe they're too enthusiastic about something. Actually, if you find that they're too extreme about something, you can call them overzealous. So maybe I'm wrong. So I shall begin at the beginning, said the DHC, and the more zealous students recorded his intention in their notebooks. So the students who were extremely interested started writing in their notebooks, writing down what he said. Begin at the beginning. These, he waved his hand, are incubators. Well, let me show you what an incubator is. It's a place where you can create things, where things survive in an isolated environment. So here's a baby incubator. So it's like an isolated, and look, you can use incubators for eggs. So once you get an egg, you put the egg in the incubator, which is an isolated environment, and it provides the right heat or the right type of air to encourage the eggs to hatch, to be born. So it's used a lot in science. It's like an isolated chamber. It can be used for many things, especially it's used for artificial, what do they call that? In vitro fertilization, an artificial womb, let's say. So I think they're making babies in here. They've got incubators and they're talking about fertilization. Let's see. These, he waved his hand, are incubators, and opening an insulated door, he showed them racks upon racks of numbered test tubes. We better take a look at what a test tube is. This is very specific language, very scientific language, I guess. Whoops. Oh. Here we go. These are test tubes. So he opened the incubator, and there were many shelves with test tubes in them. These are incubators, And opening an insulated door, he showed them racks upon racks of numbered test tubes. So each test tube had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. The week's supply of ova. Ova, those are female eggs, maybe from a human. Kept, he explained, at blood heat, whereas the male gametes, I guess we better define that. I'm not very good with scientific language. Gamete. This is not something that you have to use. The reproductive cell of an animal or part. In animals, female gametes are called ova or eggs, and male gametes are called sperm. So gametes are the... I'll show you a picture. It could be, if you see the blue and the pink, they're both, I guess, gametes. The blue one is from a male, and the red one is from a female. It's the reproductive cells. I'm going to improve my scientific vocabulary today. The week's supply of ova, Kapti explained, at blood heat, whereas the male gametes, and here he opened another door, they have to be kept at 35 instead of 37. So they're using Fahrenheit. 35 is like almost 0. It's a little bit below 0 in centigrade. And 37, well, that's not much warmer. Full blood heat sterilizes. Rams wrapped in thermogene beget no lambs. Full blood heat sterilizes. Sterile means can't reproduce. So this sentence, full blood heat sterilizes, that means if we raised the gametes to the temperature of blood, then the gametes will die. Rams wrapped in thermogene beget no lambs. I don't know what thermogene is. Let's see. I guess it's a type of heat blanket, maybe from a long time ago. All of these packages look very old. I think this story was written in the 1930s. So probably back then. See, that looks like it's kind of a cool box. Oh wait, we can't see it. Here's a better picture. So I guess it's like a thermal blanket to keep you warm. But maybe kind of old. So we don't need, it's just to know the story, what's happening, that I'm looking this up. Obviously, that's not a vocabulary word. Okay, let's see. Rams, we might as well look at that in case you don't know. That's an animal. Here's a picture of a ram. Oh. This is a ram. Rams wrapped in thermogene beget no lambs. This verb to beget, it isn't really used very much in modern English, but it means having children, having babies. So rams that are too warm, wrapped in thermogene, can't have babies. They don't beget lambs. Lambs are baby sheep or goats, or I'm not very good with animals. Let's see. Still leaning against the incubators, he gave them, while the pencils scurried illegibly across the passages. Scurry is a word that means moving very quickly. So the students are taking notes, and you can see them writing very quickly because he uses scurry. And illegibly means you can't read it. So they were writing very quickly, and probably it would be very difficult to read what they were saying. A brief description of the modern fertilizing process spoke first, of course, of its surgical introduction. The operation undergone voluntarily for the good of society, not to mention the fact that it carries a bonus amounting to 6 months' salary, continued with some account of the technique for preserving the excised ovary. To excise something means to take something out. So the ovary was taken out of the woman. The ovary was excised from the woman. For preserving the excised ovary alive and actively developing. Passed on to a consideration of optimum temperature, salinity. Saline means salt. So when they talk about passing on to consideration of optimum, so they're looking for the right temperature, the optimum temperature. Optimum kind of means like the best or the perfect. The perfect temperature, the perfect salinity, the perfect level of salt. Viscosity referred to the liquor in which the detached and... Wait a minute. Okay, viscosity I think means like how thick it is, but let's take a look at viscous. Viscous, having a thick or sticky consistency. Let's see what kind of pictures we get with viscous. So if something is thick and sticky, this is very scientific language though. So this is not something that you probably would use in regular speech. But here you can see it looks like honey. Honey is viscous. It's very thick and sticky. Still Waters is asking, does make out carry a similar meaning to illegible? Well, illegible means I can't read it, because make out could mean many different things, but one thing it could mean is I can't distinguish it. All right, let's take a look. Go back to the scribble. Let's see. So if I say still waters, I can't read anything in this. This is illegible. Okay, so first of all, this is illegible. It means I can't read it. It's difficult to read, almost impossible to read. Now I can say, can you distinguish any words? Do you recognize any words? And the phrasal verb that I would use is, do you make out any words? Which means, can you distinguish, can you see, can you identify any words? Let's see. Can I? I can't. I can't read any of this. I can't. I thought maybe I could find at least one word that I could recognize, but I don't. I can't make out any words. I can't distinguish. I can't identify any words. It is illegible. That means can't read it. All right. So passed on to a consideration of optimum temperature. So optimum means perfect, just right, best temperature. Salinity, optimum salinity, the perfect amount of salt. Optimum viscosity, the perfect amount of thickness. Sandeep Kumar is asking, can you teach base on English language? I'm not really sure what you're asking, Sandeep. Can you rephrase that a little bit? Continued with some amount of Where did we go? I lost my place. Okay. The optimum temperature, salinity, viscosity referred to the liquor in which the detached and ripened eggs were kept. And leading his charges to the work tables actually showed them how this liquor was drawn off from the test tubes. When you say draw, that means extract. So if he's talking about drawing off the liquor, as he calls it, this mixture where the eggs are growing, he's explaining how to take away the liquid from it. How it was let out, drop by drop, onto especially warmed slides of the microscope. Since we're having our science lesson today, let me show you what a microscope slide is. Here's a slide. So that's the surface where you put the thing that you want to look at. That's a microscope slide. So leading his charges, I don't think that you really use that word anymore, but a charge is someone under you. So in this case, the man talking, he's very important, and all the people looking into the microscopes are his charges. But I don't really think that's something that we would say today. Actually showed them how this liquor was drawn off from the test tubes, how it was let out drop by drop onto specially warmed slides of the microscope, how the eggs which it contained were inspected for abnormalities, counted and transferred to a porous receptacle. A pore is like a little indentation, a little hole. We better take a look at what a pore is. Whoops. These are pores. So you see the skin is it's not smooth, it's not flat. It has these little marks, and these are called pores. Let's see. Let's just compare smooth with porous. I don't know if you can see this, but if you see these two surfaces, one appears to be very smooth. It probably isn't, but if you compare the two, one has little holes, which means it would absorb a lot of different material, and the other one is smooth, and it would be very easy to wash it because those little holes hold things. So when you describe something as porous, sometimes intentionally it means it's meant to absorb something. Where was that word? Let's look at it again. How the eggs which it contained were inspected for... warm slides of the microscope. How the eggs which it contained were inspected for abnormalities. Abnormalities means something unusual. So the eggs were inspected looking for unusual things. Counted and transferred to a porous receptacle. So a receptacle is something that is designed to receive. So a garbage can, you could call it a garbage receptacle. It's designed to receive garbage. Receptacle means something that is designed to receive. A porous receptacle, I'm not sure if it's a bowl or a cup, or I don't know yet, but it's designed to receive this liquid, and it's porous. That means it won't just be like smooth glass. It will actually take into itself the material. How? And he now took them to watch the operation. This receptacle was immersed in warm bouillon, containing a free-swimming spermatozoa at a minimum concentration of 1,000 per cubic centimeter. Okay, I guess we have to look at these words. This... I hope I don't get in trouble from YouTube. Wait, let's see. What happened? Uh-oh. My computer's going crazy. Probably I just hit the wrong button somewhere. Okay, this is sperm, okay? Or I'm not sure why sometimes they say spermatozoa and sometimes they say sperm. Maybe the full word is spermatozoa, but people just say sperm, but that's sperm. And bouillon, you know, the only time I ever think about bouillon is for making soup. Or, okay, it could also be for gold. Let's say chicken bouillon. I guess it must be the shape, which is the reason why they call it bouillon. But when I think of bouillon, I think of soup, because you put this in hot water and then it spreads out and it makes soup. Let's reread that sentence. This receptacle was immersed in warm bouillon. So I imagine the receptacle is sitting in some water with other things mixed in the water. But remember, maybe it's like a sponge, because a sponge is porous. So if you imagine putting a sponge in something that looks like chicken broth that's kind of warm or hot, containing free-swimming spermatozoa at a minimum concentration of 100,000 per cubic centimeter. He insisted, and how? After 10 minutes, the container was lifted out of the liquor and its contents re-examined. How, if any of the eggs remained unfertilized, it was again immersed, and if necessary, yet again, how the fertilized ova, that's the egg, went back into the incubators, where the alphas and betas remained until definitely bottled. While the gammas, deltas, and epsilons were brought out again after only 36 hours to undergo Bokanovsky's process. Okay, so if you're thinking about the Greek alphabet, the first two letters are alpha and beta. And alpha is used quite a bit to mean like number one, the top one, the most important one. So when you see that word alpha, a lot of times it means like number one. It's just the first letter of the Greek alphabet. And the second letter of the Greek alphabet is beta. So if alpha is number one, beta is number two. It's not exactly the best. It's not exactly the preferable one. The alpha one is the important one. And the beta one is maybe like backup, support. Okay, and then, let's see. Remained until definitely bottled. While the gammas, deltas, and epsilons, again, these are the names of the letters of the Greek alphabet in order. So these ones are not important at all. It's only the alpha and the beta that are important. The gammas, the deltas, and the epsilons were brought out again after only 36 hours to undergo Bokanovsky's process. So when they managed to fertilize the egg in this thing that they're making, they would not throw away the ones that didn't fertilize an egg. They would keep them, and then they would try some other process to fertilize an egg with them. Bokanovsky's process, repeated the director, and the students underlined the word in their little notebook. One egg, one embryo, one adult, normality. But the Bokanovskified egg will bud, will proliferate, and will divide. Actually, I think in the last chapter of 1984, we talked about this word bud. Let me show you what bud is, in case you don't remember. It's a pretty useful word. Let me see. Okay. The thing on the left is a flower bud, and the one in the right that's opening is a budding flower. So a bud is like a baby flower. It's green. It doesn't look pretty. It's just the beginning of a flower. And then you can use the word budding to mean like growing, becoming beautiful. I bud into adulthood when I was 18. And then you can picture me opening like a flower when I was 18. It's used like that. That's how they use it. But the bud is the one on the left, the immature one, the baby one. How did they use it here? A Bokanovskified egg will bud, so it will become like the baby flower. Will proliferate, that means there will be many. And will divide from 8 to 96 buds, and every bud will grow into a perfectly formed embryo, and every embryo a full-sized adult, making 96 human beings grow where only one grew before. Progress. Essentially, the DHC concluded Bokanovskification, that's hard to say, Bokanovskification, consists of a series of arrests of development. Arrest means stop. So arrested development is when development is stopped. So, maybe when you're 1 year old, if maybe they give you a shot and they arrest your development, which means you will not grow, you will not become bigger, your brain will not grow. Where were they using that? So essentially, the DHC concluded Bokanovskification consists of a series of arrests of development. So it's like maybe they take one stage, like fertilizing, and then they stop it. They arrest the development, and then they wait or do something, and then they let the process proceed. I think that's how I'm interpreting it. We check the normal growth, and paradoxically enough, the egg responds by budding. A paradox is something that is illogical. So when it says paradoxically enough, the egg responds by budding, you wouldn't think the egg would do this, but the egg starts forming into a flower, or it starts the process. Responds by budding. The pencils were busy. Responds by budding. He pointed. On a very slowly moving band, a rack full of test tubes was entering a large metal box. Another rack full was emerging. Machinery faintly purred. Do you know that purring is the sound of a cat? If a cat is very happy, a cat does something like that, if you have any experience with cats. You can talk about machines purring. That's the sound of like maybe a car engine. A car engine sounds like that. That's purring. That's what a cat does. So machinery faintly purred. Faint means weak. So in the background, in the laboratory, you could hear the machines. It took 8 minutes for the tubes to go through, he told them. 8 minutes of hard X-rays. I don't know, you probably know what an X-ray is, but just in case. These are X-rays. And so the machine is called an X-ray machine, at least if you're not a scientist. They probably have a better word for that, a fancier word. But I would call it an X-ray machine. Machinery faintly purred. It took 8 minutes for the tubes to go through, he told them. 8 minutes of hard X-rays, being about as much as an egg can stand. So they do 8 minutes of very intensive X-ray activity, and then he makes this remark. He says, where was it? Being about as much as an egg can stand. If you can stand something, you can tolerate something. So probably you've learned the phrase, oh, I can't stand it, which means I hate it. Really what it means is I can't tolerate it. I can't stand loud music. If you say I can stand, that's different. That means it's okay. I can do it. So 8 minutes is what an egg can stand. 8 minutes of X-rays is what an egg can stand. If you go after 8 minutes, the egg cannot tolerate 8 minutes. It will die. A few died, of the rest, the least susceptible divided into two. Here I think susceptible means like weak. The weakest ones, or the strongest ones, least susceptible, divided into two. Most put out 4 buds, some 8. All were returned to the incubators, where the buds began to develop. Then after 2 days were suddenly chilled and checked. Chilled means not freezing and not warm. It's kind of cold, just cold. So they must have put these in refrigerators. Because, let's see, we're suddenly chilled and checked. 2, 4, 8, the buds in their turn budded. So the buds, the immature flower, started to show signs of growing, turning into a flower. And having budded, were dosed almost to death with alcohol. When you give a dose of something, it's like a measurement of medicine. So if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, here, take this medicine, 2 doses per day. Whatever maybe the dose is 1 spoonful, that would be 1 dose. A dose is a measurement of medicine. So 2 spoonfuls a day, 2 doses a day. That's the dose. But here it says that having budded were the what? 2, 4, 8, the buds in their turn budded, and having budded were dosed almost to death with alcohol. So by using the word dose, we understand it's some kind of medicine process or some kind of help to grow process. So when they started to bud, they were given a lot of alcohol as a type of medicine. Consequently, burgeoned again and having budded. Bud out of, bud were thereafter, further arrest being generally fatal. So when he says arrested development, I guess what happens is once the egg is fertilized and they can see that it's fertilized, they pour alcohol on it to make it stop. And I'm just guessing. I don't fully understand this. This is pretty complicated. But I guess what that does, it arrests the development. It makes the egg stop budding. But a result of that is that it multiplies. It divides. One fertilized egg becomes 2 eggs fertilized. By which time the original egg was in a fair way of becoming anything from 8 to 96 embryos. An embryo is the stage of a baby growing inside the mother. So these are embryos. A prodigious improvement, you will agree, on nature. Identical twins, but not in piddling 2s and 3s as in the old viviparous days. Wow, what is that? Okay. Piddling piddling is a word that makes something sound insignificant. Like it's not important. You made some piddling comments. It means you made some very insignificant comments. It sounds like you're angry if you say that. But so usually if you have identical twins, always if you have identical twins, it's only 2. He says, but not in piddling 2s. Like, that's so stupid, 2. In 3s, and 3s in the old viviparous days. Viviparous. I don't know what that word means. I can't even say it. Viviparous. Okay, this word is a scientific word, and it could mean bringing forth live young that have developed inside the parent. So, for example, a chicken is not viviparous because it grows in an egg outside the mother. But I guess humans are normally viviparous. They grow inside the mother, and then when they're ready, they come out. In botany, it says reproducing from buds that form plantlets while still attached to the parent or plant, or from seeds that germinate within the fruit. So viviparous means that the style in which you are born is that you stay inside of your mother until you're prepared to come out. Still Waters says, put up with something, someone I have enough, be sick and tired of. Can I use one of them to express I can't stand? Let's see, if you say, oh, I can't stand John. I can't put up with John. If you say, I can't stand John, the emphasis, they do mean very similar things. But if you say, I can't stand John, the emphasis is on hate. That's like saying, I hate John. But if you say, I can't put up with John, that means I cannot be around him. I cannot be near. Maybe if you say, I can't stand John, maybe you can work with him, or you can somehow figure a way to be with him, even if you hate him. But if you say, I can't put up with John, it means I can't be near him. I hate what he says. It makes me angry. I can't work with him. It's too much. So when you say, I can't put up with something, the idea is more of, I cannot be near it because I hate it. I can't stand loud music. I hate loud music, but I can survive if I'm near loud music. But if I say I can't put up with loud music, it means I cannot be near it because I hate it. So there is a little difference. Hi, Hadi. How are you doing today? You're going to like this book, Hadi, because it's filled with very crazy vocabulary. I think we've only gone like 2 pages. I have to keep looking at words, so I think you'll probably like this one. Let's see, could you please tell me, so regarding put up with and can't stand, which is strongest expression? Can I use them interchangeably? Well, like I said, when you say I can't put up with, it sounds like I don't want to be near it. I can't be near it because I hate it. So I guess that's probably stronger. They're both pretty strong, though. I guess it depends on the context. Hadi Hassan says, "Are humans viviparous?" Apparently, wait. Let's ask Google. According to the definition that I just read, humans are. Let's just confirm it, though. Are humans viviparous? Well, according to Google, yes. But that just really confirms what we learned about that word. I've never seen that word before. That's my first time seeing that word that I can remember. Okay, so identical twins, but not in piddling 2s and 3s. So piddling is when you want to make something seem small or insignificant. So normally when people have twins, it has to be in 2s. Well, if they're saying identical twins, that always has to be 2s, from my understanding. But so he's saying, not in piddling 2s, but in, how did he say? Identical twins, but not in piddling 2s or 3s in the old viviparous days. So not twins and 2s like before when babies grew inside their mother. When an egg would sometimes accidentally divide, actually by dozens, by scores at some time. So dozen is a very common word, and it means 12. When you see the word dozen, that always means 12. Score, I think score is 15. It's not very commonly used anymore. Or maybe it's 20. Let me see. Around 20. So when you say scores of, that means around 20. Where did we go? So actually by dozens, by scores at a time. So by 20s at a time. Scores, the director repeated, and flung out his arms. This is flinging out your arms. Scores. But one of the students was fool enough to ask where the advantage lay. My good boy, the director wheeled sharply round on him. Can't you see? Can't you see? He raised his hand. His expression was solemn. Solemn means very serious. Volkanovsky's process is one of the major instruments of social stability. Major instruments of social stability. So they're always writing down his words. Standard men and women in uniform, batches. Batches means like a set or a group. The whole of a small factory staffed with products of a single Volkanovskified egg. 96 identical twins working 96 identical machines. The voice was almost tremulous with enthusiasm. A tremor is like a shaking. 96 identical machines. And he was very excited, very enthusiastic. You really know where you are? For the first time in history, he quoted the planetary motto, community, identity, stability. Grand words. If we could Volkanovskify indefinitely, the whole problem would be solved. So he's saying if everyone were exactly the same, we wouldn't have any more problems. Solved by the standard gammas, unvarying deltas, uniform epsilons, millions of identical twins, principle of mass production, at last applied to biology. So it sounds like they're not just using alpha and beta to mean alpha meaning the best and beta meaning like the second best. But it seems like they have categories for these other Greek letters, like, so if you're number 3, or if you're a gamma or a delta, that means something, like maybe they will raise you up to do a particular job. I don't know. 96 seemed to be the limit, 72 a good average. From the same ovary and the same gametes of the same male to manufacture as many batches of identical twins as possible. That was best. Sadly, a second best that they could do. And even that was difficult. For in nature, it takes 30 years for 200 eggs to reach maturity. But our business is to stabilize the population at this moment, here and now. Dribbling out twins over a quarter of a century would have to be the use of that. So when something is dribbling, it's happening very slowly. So when he says dribbling out twins, it means this process is very slow. It's just one set and then another set. Dribble, I think it's related to the word drip. If you imagine like a dripping faucet, a dripping sink. Drip, drip, drip. And dribble means like little drips. Drip, 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 drip. Obviously no use at all. But Podsnap's technique had immensely accelerated the process of ripening. When something is ripe, it means it's ready. And we usually use that to talk about fruit or something like that. So I mean, ripe is a pretty common word, but it's one of those words that people don't usually learn. So it's a good idea to take a look at this. So which bananas do you want? Do you want the yellow ones or the green ones? Well, you probably want the yellow ones because the yellow ones are ripe. They're ready to eat. They're mature. and the unripe ones are not ready. I have to find my place again. I lost my place. Obviously no use at all, but Podsnap's technique had immensely accelerated the process of ripening. So if this technique has made the process of these eggs growing into humans, growing from babies to adults, or maybe they're just talking about eggs right now, but there's some process that they practice which makes this ripening, making the egg be ready, much more quickly than before. They could make sure of at least 150 mature eggs within 2 years. Fertilize and Bokanovskify, in other words, multiply by 72, and you get an average of nearly 11,000 brothers and sisters and 150 batches of identical twins, all within 2 years of the same age. And in exceptional cases, we can make one ovary yield us over 15,000 adult individuals. Beckoning to a fair-haired, ruddy young man who happened to be passing at the moment. To beckon means to come here. If I beckon you, that means I'm inviting you to come over to me. So beckoning probably with his hand, meaning like this. So saying come here with his hand. Beckoning to a fair-haired, ruddy young man who happened to be passing at the moment. The Hadi says the book contains really abstruse scientific terminology, I guess. Well, I'm hoping, I've never read this book. I just know that it's supposed to be an interesting story like 1984 that was written close to 100 years ago, but somehow it, supposedly, from what I understand, it describes our situation now. So that's why I think it's interesting to read it. But I'm hoping that this is just, that it's not like this throughout the entire book. I think they start to tell a story, but it's starting in a laboratory. So they're using a lot of scientific medical terminology. We'll find out. So beckoning to a fair-haired, ruddy young man who happened to be passing at the moment. Mr. Foster, he called. The ruddy young man approached. Can you tell us of the record for a single ovary, Mr. Foster? So he wants to know how many, from a single ovary, from a single egg, what is the record number? What is the top number of babies that you produced? 16,012 in this center. Mr. Foster replied without hesitation. He spoke very quickly, had a vivacious blue eye. When you see that word viva, which we've seen in that, what was that word that we were doing earlier? Viviparous. You can take those words apart. Vivi means live, and per means two. So viviparous means living together, which is what, which is how you describe babies who stay inside their mother until they're ready to come out. They live together. Viviparous, live in a pair. And here, vivacious means with a lot of life, with a lot of energy. So when you see that VV, it usually has something to do with life in some way. He had a vivacious blue eye and took an evident pleasure in quoting figures. Figures is another way of saying numbers. So 16,012 and 189 batches of identicals. But of course, they've done much better, he rattled on. Rattle is this sound. That's the sound of a rattle. But to rattle on means continue talking, not really saying anything interesting. But of course they've done much better, he rattled on. In some of the tropical centers, Singapore has often produced over 16,500, and Mombasa has actually touched the 17,000 mark. But then they have unfair advantages. You should see the way a Negro ovary responds to pituitary. The pituitary gland is... This is our scientific, medical, biological class today, I guess. It's a gland in the brain. It's a thing in the brain. Let's see. I think that... Well, let's see what the pituitary gland is responsible for. But I think that involves like sexual excitement or something. That does the... Or maybe growth. It regulates growth, metabolism, and reproduction through the hormones that it produces. Okay, I think that's a good enough explanation for now. But then they have unfair advantages. You should see the way a Negro ovary responds to pituitary. It's quite astonishing when you're used to working with European materials. Still, he added, with a laugh, but the light combat was in his eyes, and the lift of his chin was challenging. So he's kind of, what do you mean? Like, he's lifting his chin up. Still, we mean to beat them if we can. So he's doing a challenge. I'm working on a wonderful Delta minus ovary at this moment. Only just 18 months old. Over 12,700 children already, either decanted or in embryo. And still going strong. We'll beat them yet. That's the spirit I like, cried the director, and clapped Mr. Foster on the shoulder. Come along with us and give these boys the benefit of your expert knowledge. Mr. Foster smiled modestly. With pleasure. So modestly means like being humble or a little bit embarrassed. So let's see, what would a modest smile be like? I don't know. I can't do it. But kind of like smiling, but with a little bit of embarrassment, or feeling very special because this important person is inviting you to a more important activity. Okay. Mr. Foster smiled modestly. With pleasure, they went. In the bottling room, all was harmonious bustle and ordered activity. Bustle is like a lot of movement. So some people love the bustle of the city, all the movement, all the activity in the city. And some people prefer the quiet of the country. So in the room that they went into, the bottling room, whatever that means, there's a lot of bustle. People are moving around. But it's not chaotic because it says ordered activity. People are moving and busy, but it isn't crazy. Hadi says an endocrinologist deals with pituitary glands. I think so. I think that an endocrinologist deals with hormones, and hormones, I think, are produced by glands. I'm not very good with science, but let me just check. Medical specialty treats people with conditions that are caused by problems with the endocrine gland and hormones. Yeah, it's complicated. I don't know because it says that an endocrinologist deals with endocrine glands, but I don't know what the endocrine glands are. Let's see, endocrine glands. Endocrine glands are ductless glands of the endocrine system that secrete their products, hormones, directly into the blood. Yes, the pituitary gland is an endocrine gland, according to Google. Okay, let's see. Flaps of fresh sow's peritoneum, oh no, ready to cut to the proper size, came shooting up into the lifts from the organ store in the sub-basement. Okay. All right. Well, sow is a I know sow as meaning a pig, but I think sometimes it's used for female animals. Any female animal. Let me see. Or any female animal any viviparous female animal. An adult female swine. So it's an adult female pig. The adult female of various other animals, such as a bear. So mainly when you hear the word sow, it's going to be referring to a pig, but it could refer to females of other types of animals, and they give the example of a bear. So flesh fraps of sow's peritoneum. Okay, I don't know what peritoneum is. I was thinking to myself, oh, what if this is a short chapter? Maybe I'll read 2 chapters today. But this is actually, I wasn't expecting such complicated language. So I think we'll be doing just 1 chapter. The peritoneum is a serous membrane that lies in the abdominal cavity. Okay, so let's just say part of the sow's stomach. So flaps are like long pieces. Flapping is this. So anything that can move like this is flapping. If you see a flag and the wind is blowing the flag is flapping in the breeze. Or if you have a sheet of paper like this, and I go like this is flapping a piece of paper. So flap is mostly about a movement, but you can call something a flap if it's long like paper and it moves like paper. You could call it a flap of paper if you want. But this is a flap of fresh sow's peritoneum. So it's a flap of cow's stomach. Ready to cut to the proper size, came shooting up in the lips from the organ store in the sub-basement. Whiz, and then click. Whiz is whoosh, whoosh, maybe even moving in a circle. Whoosh, that's whizzing. Whiz, and then click. The lift hatches flew open. The bottle liner had only to reach out a hand, take the flap, insert. So I guess he's describing a machine and how the machine prepares the bottle for whatever is happening next. And before the lined bottle had time to travel out of reach along the endless band, whoosh, whiz, and then click, another flap of peritoneum had shot up from the depths, ready to be slipped into yet another bottle. The next of that slow, interminable procession on the band. So because he's saying band, he's talking about like a conveyor belt. Wait, let me look at that. This object used in production is called a conveyor belt. Convey means carry, and belt, you probably know belt, like the belt around your waist, is the blue part, is the belt. You can also call the blue part a band. That's why I think he's describing like a conveyor belt, because of the use of the word band here. Let's just read that final part again. Ready to be slipped into yet another bottle, the next of that slow, interminable procession on the band. So interminable, terminate means finish, but interminable means can't finish, never finish, forever. And procession, if you think of a procession, think of like maybe soldiers walking down the street, that's a procession. A group of people walking in one direction is a procession. So this never-ending procession, this never-ending of here's one bottle, then another bottle, then another bottle, it's just always happening, interminable. It never ends. It's a procession, so there's a long line, and it's on a band. It's on a conveyor belt. Next to the liners stood the matriculators. The procession advanced. One by one, the eggs were transferred from their test tubes to their large containers. Deftly and peritoneal lining was slit. Deftly, the peritoneal lining was slit. Wow, this is such a different book from 1984. Let's define deftly. In a way that is neat and skillful. Probably comes from the same word as adept. Deftly, the peritoneal lining was slit. When you take a knife and you make a hole, not like this, but when you go like this, that's a slit. Maybe we'll just take a look at a few pictures of slits. So there's a tongue twister here. Wait, let's see. So it's when you take something sharp and you make a line into something else, like in this picture. And this is actually a tongue twister. I slit a sheet and a sheet I slit. And you have to be very careful because if you say that wrong, you're saying some bad words. Hadi says interminable, unending, long. Well, I think interminable and unending are synonyms, but long doesn't mean forever. It just means that the duration isn't short, but it could have a finish. But if you say unending or interminable, that's something with no ending. But can you say I slit a sheet and a sheet I slit without saying any bad words? Next to the liners stood the matriculators. The procession advanced. One by one, the eggs were transferred from their test tubes to the larger containers. Deftly, so very expertly, the peritoneal lining was slit. So they took a sharp thing like a knife and they did that. They made not a hole but a slit. A slit is long and skinny. The morula dropped into place and the saline solution poured in. Morula? All right, let's figure out what morula is. Okay, it's very scientific. A solid mass of blastomeres resulting in a number of cleavages of a zygote or fertilized egg. Okay, it's just a part of the reproduction process. Let's say that. The morula dropped into place. The saline solution, whenever you see that S-A-L, sal, that means salt. So a saline solution is like some kind of liquid, probably water with maybe some other things. But the main thing about it is it has a lot of salt. Hadi is asking deftly versus dexterous. To me, dexterous has to do with the fingers. I just want to check the meaning. Okay, well, maybe not with the fingers, but with the hands. So if you're very good, like playing the piano or drawing or something that takes a lot of skill with the hands or the fingers, that is when you would say dexterous. So it's only about the hands, really. But if you say deftly, that could be anything. That could be any part of your body. That could maybe even be your brain. So it isn't necessarily physical if you say deftly. And already the bottle had passed, and it was the turn of the labelers. Heredity, date of fertilization, membership of Bokanovsky group. So I think that Bokanovsky group, that's the alpha, beta, gamma, delta. I think that's how they categorize them. No longer anonymous, but named, identified, the procession marched slowly on, and through an opening in the wall, slowly on into the social predestination room. 88 cubic meters of card index, said Foster with relish. Relish, let me show you something. Okay. Do you ever eat hot dogs? And sometimes if you eat a hot dog, you would put something on here that makes it extra tasty. Usually made out of pickles. And this is called relish. And the purpose of pickle relish is it makes extra flavor. It makes you enjoy it more. So if you could remember that, then you could remember that to relish something, relish as a verb, it means like to make it more delicious, to enjoy it more. So let's see. 88 cubic meters of card index, said Mr. Foster with relish as they entered. So he's enjoying saying that. He's very proud that they have 88 cubic meters of card index. So he says it with a lot of it. You could see him enjoying it. 88 cubic meters of card index. He's really enjoying that information. He loves it. He said it with relish. Containing all the relevant information, added the director. Brought up to date every morning and coordinated every afternoon, on the basis of which they make their calculations. Hadi asks, ambidextrous. Do you know, I'm left-handed, so I use my left hand for writing or for doing anything. And how is that in Pakistan? What do people think of left-handed people? When I was growing up and before then, that was something that if you were left-handed, your parents or your grandparents, my grandmother, tried to make me right-handed because it's considered bad or evil, actually evil. She was very religious and she thought it was evil to be left-handed. So they try to make you write with your right hand. So when you say ambidextrous, bi means two. So an ambidextrous person, that means can use both hands. That means you can write with your left hand and you can write with your right hand. Or you can do something with your left hand and you can also do the same thing equally with your right hand. That's what ambidextrous means. So you can see how this word dexterous always has some idea about the hand. Brought up to date every morning and coordinated every afternoon, on the basis of which they make their calculations. So many individuals of such and such quality. You know, you use this phrase such and such when you don't know the word or you don't know the number. How much did you pay for that computer? I don't know. I don't remember. I paid such and such dollars. It's just a way of saying I don't have the exact name or the exact number of something. You can even use it to talk about people whose name you don't know. I was talking to such and such the other day. Probably you would say so and so if you're talking about a person. I was talking to so and so the other day, but I don't recommend that you use that because it's very disrespectful. It means I don't care about remembering his name. It doesn't matter. He's not important. So you have to be careful using words like that because it could be very mean or disrespectful. So many people of such and such quality said. So that's like saying so many individuals of I don't know what kind of quality. Maybe they'll be good singers. Maybe they'll be good workers. Maybe they'll be very smart. Distributed in such and such quantities. I don't know how many. I don't know which numbers. So some of them will be workers. I don't know. And I don't know how many numbers. It's just a phrase you use when you don't know the exact name or the exact number. The optimum decanting rate at any given moment. Unforeseen wastages promptly made good. Promptly, repeated Mr. Foster. If you knew the amount of overtime I had to put in after the last Japanese earthquake. He laughed good-humoredly and shook his head. The predestinators send in their figures to the fertilizers. Destiny is a word that means your purpose. But it's used when you're talking about it's something you can't change. It's your purpose and you can't change it. So it is my destiny to be poor. I will always be poor. I can't change that. It's my destiny. It kind of means like it's what God has decided for me. is kind of what it means. To predestine something means, okay, this is how we're going to make it for the future. This is our map, our plan for the future. This is like predestiny. It's like planning the future. This is how it's going to be. Now let's do it. So I think the predestinators are office workers who decide, okay, we need 500 workers in the factory in Chicago. So they're predicting what they need for the future. And then they tell the lab, we need 500 workers for our factory in Chicago. And then the lab will manufacture the babies in the laboratory. The predestinators send in their figures, their numbers, to the fertilizers, to the laboratory. And we give them the embryos they ask for. And the bottles come in here to be predestinated in detail. So once they fertilize the egg, then they decide, okay, this will go for request number 20. I don't know, something like that probably. After which they are sent down to the embryo store, where we now proceed ourselves. And opening a door, Mr. Foster led the way down a staircase into the basement. The temperature was still tropical. I wonder why they keep saying that London is tropical. Because that's how the book opened, that it was hot and kind of tropical. And again, maybe by tropical he means humid. A lot of wetness in the air. They descended into the thickening twilight. 2 doors and a passage with a double run ensured the cellar against any possible infiltration of the day. 2 doors and a passage with a double turn ensured a cellar against any possible infiltration of the day. I think what they're talking about there is the temperature. Because these things have to be kept at a very specific temperature. So there are many doors, and no matter what the weather is, that will not influence the temperature in the room. Embryos are like a photograph film, said Mr. Foster waggishly. Wagging... Oh wait, let's look at a picture of something. Let's see. Okay, this will work. The way that you would describe this dog is the dog is wagging his tail. So wagging is this movement. The dog is wagging his tail. But sometimes you use it talking about people wagging their finger. So that could be like to tell you something that you're not happy about, or maybe it could be to make a point. And I think that's how it's being used here. Foster waggishly, as he pushed open the second door. You can only stand... They can only stand red light. They can only stand red light. So I kind of picture him doing this, informing people, lecturing people like a teacher or something. Sharing information like a teacher. And in fact, the sultry darkness into which the students now followed him was visible and crimson. Crimson is a type of red. Like the darkness of closed eyes on a summer's afternoon, the bulging flanks of row on receding row and tier above tier of bottles glinted with innumerable rubies. Glinting is like reflecting light, reflecting little pieces of light. And a ruby, it's funny because we had that in 1984 also. A ruby is a stone of a red color. Yeah, in 1984 they were talking about the ruby color of the wine. So this is the color of a ruby. It's kind of a deep red, a dark red. But here I think it must be talking about blood. Twilight, Hadi is asking, twilight is dusk. Well, you know, that just means 2. And light, you know what that means. So twilight means 2 lights. and it's usually used for dusk. I wonder if you could use it for dawn. If you could use it for dawn, I've never heard it. But I mean, really all twilight means is two lights. The light of the moon and the sun together. That period when one is going down and the other one is coming up. Well, I think officially you could use it for either both, because when I look up the definition of twilight, it says the period of light from the sky between full night and sunrise, or between sunset and full night. But when I think about it, I don't really hear people referring to the morning time when the sun is coming up as twilight. But technically it is. So most of the time, if you say dusk, if you say twilight, that means two lights, but usually it's used to refer to the night. Hadi is saying the tail wags the dog. Okay, if you look at let's look at the picture again. So if you look at this picture, oh, that's not a very good picture. Let me see if I can find another one. That's not a good picture at all. Okay, this one works. Wagging is that movement, okay? This movement. You see what I'm doing with my hand? You see what the dog is doing on the screen? That is a wagging movement, okay? So what is moving is the tail. The dog is wagging his tail. That's what wagging means. It means doing this movement. I'm wagging my finger. Hadi, learn more vocabulary. I'm wagging my finger at you. So that's the movement of wag. There is an expression which is wag the dog. And I think it comes from a book. I think it comes from a story. But wagging the dog is doing, trying to make people support a war. Trying to get people excited about having a war. And I think that that expression comes from a book. And well, let's check now that you're mentioning it. Wag the dog is a political term, the act of creating a diversion from a damaging issue, usually through military force. So if something is happening in your country and the leaders are very embarrassed by it, sometimes they'll start a war as a distraction so that you're not thinking about the horrible things that they're doing. And this is wagging the dog. Let's see. It stems from the generic use of the term to mean a small and seemingly unimportant entity, the tail, controls the bigger. Oh, okay. So I thought it came from a book, but I guess it means instead of wagging the tail, you wag the dog. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me, that expression. The bulging flanks of row on receding row and tier above tier of bottles glinted with innumerable rubies. So you can picture, I guess the rubies, it's a red color because it's got blood, or maybe because of the red light reflecting on it. And among the rubies moved the dim red specters of men and ghosts with purple eyes and all symptoms of lupus. Lupus is a type of blood disease. The hum and rattle of the machinery faintly stirred the air. Well, these people sound weird. Give them a few figures, Mr. Foster, said the director, who was tired of talking. Mr. Foster was only too happy to give them a few figures. 220 meters long, 200 wide, 10 high. He pointed upwards, like the chickens drinking. He pointed upwards. Like chickens drinking, the students lifted their eyes towards the distant ceiling. That's how chickens drink? I don't know. Let's see. The tiers of racks, ground floor level, first gallery, second gallery. The spidery steelwork of the gallery above gallery faded away in all directions into the dark. Near them, 3 red ghosts were busily unloading demijohns from a moving staircase. What's a demijohn? A bulbous narrow neck bottle. See, I would not recommend using this. I mean, this is something, I have this at home. But I would never call it this. I would never think to call it that. It's a type of container. But I've never heard that before. I think it must be an old term. This is a demijohn. Three tiers of racks, ground floor level. First gallery, second gallery, the spidery steel work of gallery above gallery faded away in all directions into the dark. Nearing them, 3 red ghosts were busily unloading demijohns from a moving staircase. So there are these people who work in this room with a certain type of blood disease, lupus, and he describes their eyes as being purple. And earlier he referred to them as specters, which is another way of saying ghost. And again, he's referring to them as ghosts. So I think they must look very strange or very scary. And he says that... What did he say? Near them, the 3 red ghosts were busily unloading demijohns from a moving staircase. So these scary-looking people, these sick-looking people, were removing these demijohns, these jugs, these large bottles, from a moving staircase. Hadi is asking about sultry versus muggy. Let's see. Sultry to me means hot and wet. Hot and humid. Suggesting now the thing is, sultry also means like sexy. Okay, and muggy does not. So if you say something is sultry, actually, if you type the word sultry, then what you probably, in Google anyway, they show pictures of beautiful women who look very sexual. Because sultry can mean that. But it means hot and humid. Muggy is like an uncomfortable hot and humid. I guess if you say it's a sultry night, that could be good. I mean, you could still be comfortable. Muggy is not comfortable. But let's see what the official definition of muggy is. Because if you say it was a sultry night, it almost sounds sexy. But if you say muggy night, that sounds like it's hot and wet and I feel horrible. Unpleasantly warm and humid, muggy. Yeah, so they are similar, but sultry sounds nice, and muggy sounds very unpleasant, very uncomfortable. The escalator from the social predestination room. Each bottle could be placed on one of 15 racks. Each rack, though you couldn't see it, was a conveyor traveling at a rate of 33 1/3 meters an hour. 267 days at 8 meters a day. 2,136 meters in all. One circuit of the cellar at the ground level, on the first gallery, half on the second, and on the 267th morning, daylight in the decanting room, independent existence, so called. But in the interval, Mr. Foster concluded, we've managed to do a lot to them. Oh, a very great deal. And by the way, a great deal, which even if I ask advanced speakers of English sometimes, they'll say, oh, that means you paid a good price, a great deal. But a great deal also means many, a lot. And that's what it means here. Oh, Mr. Foster concluded, we have managed to do a lot to them, a very great deal. So we managed to do a lot of things to these, whatever you want to call them, during that time. And then he says, for emphasis, a great deal, meaning many, many things. Oh, a very great deal. His laugh was knowing and triumphant. That's the spirit I like, said the doctor once more. Let's walk around. You tell them everything, Mr. Foster. Mr. Foster duly told them. Told them of the growing embryo on its bed of peritoneum, made them taste the rich blood surrogate on which it fed. Surrogate is like a substitute. So if the baby were growing in its mother, that would be like a typical birth. But if you fertilize an egg and you put it in a woman who isn't the mother, that's a surrogate mother. That's a substitute mother. And here there's some kind of surrogate, because normally the mother would be feeding the baby inside her body. But here they're using a surrogate to feed it. What is the surrogate? I don't know if it's a machine or some kind of animal, or who knows. Explained why it had to be stimulated with placentine and thyroxine. Told them of the corpus luteum extract. Showed them the jets through which at every 12th meter from 0 to 2040 it was automatically injected. Spoke of those gradually increasing doses. Remember, a dose is a measurement of medicine. Increasing doses of pituitary administration during the final 96 meters of their course. Described the artificial maternal circulation installed on every bottle at meter 112. Showed them the reservoir of blood, of a blood surrogate, the centrifugal pump that kept the liquid moving over the placenta and drove it through the synthetic lung. Synthetic means fake, artificial, and waste product filter. Referred to the embryo's troublesome tendency to anemia, to the massive doses of hog's stomach. Hog, again, is another word for pig. And the fetal foal's liver, in which, in consequence, it had to be supplied. Show them the simple mechanism by means of which, during the last 2 meters out of every 8, all the embryos were simultaneously shaken into familiarity with movement, hinted at gravity of the so-called trauma of decanting. Decanter is like a container. If you decant something, you're taking it out of the container. And enumerated the precautions taken to minimize by a suitable training of the bottled embryo. That dangerous shock told them of the test for sex carried out in the neighborhood of meter 200. Let me read that again. That dangerous shock told them of the tests for sex carried out in the neighborhood of meter 200. I'm not sure what that means. Explain the system of labeling and a T for the males, a circle for the females. So by sex they mean, is it a boy or a girl? So I guess the room is measured by meters. And as time moves on, maybe they move these containers forward, and at meter 200, you know if it's a boy or a girl. Well, a decanter, I don't think it has to necessarily... Hadi is asking, decanter is a container holding wine in it, but what does it mean here as a decanting room? But I don't think that it's specifically for wine. Let's just check the definition. Oh yeah, I guess they just use it for wine. That's the official definition, but I've seen decanter used for other things too. So the decanting room, when you decant something... Well, now I'm questioning myself. That D in decant means, okay, you put the wine in the decanter, and the purpose is that it sits there, and the way it's shaped, oxygen interacts with the wine in a particular way. So usually what you do, but you do this with other alcohols also, is you pour it into the decanter and you have to let it sit for a while. And this allows for the liquid to breathe. So I don't know how long you wait, 30 minutes, 1 hour, or something like that. And then it should be ideal for drinking after it has interacted with oxygen for a long time. But also decanting something could mean like to pour it out. So decanting room would mean either where they put the liquid in the container so that it can interact with oxygen or something like that to be ready for the next step. But also it could mean the place where they empty it. And I'm not sure which. But maybe we'll find out in a minute. Showing them the simple mechanism and by means of which, during the last 2 meters out of every 8, all embryos were simultaneously shaken into familiarity with movement, hinted at the gravity of so-called trauma of decanting. So what does that mean? Trauma means like a bad experience. Does that mean the trauma of being in the bottle? Or does that mean the trauma of leaving the bottle? I'm not sure. And enumerated the precautions taken to minimize by a suitable training for the bottled embryo. The dangerous shock. Told them of tests for sex carried out in the neighborhood of meter 2000. Explained the system of labeling. A T for males, a circle for females, and for those who were destined to become free martins, a question mark, black on a white ground. For, of course, said Mr. Foster, in the vast majority of cases, fertility is merely a nuisance. 1 fertile ovary in 1200, that would really be quite sufficient for our purposes. But we want to have a good choice. And of course, one must always leave an enormous margin of safety. So we allow as many as 30% of the female embryos to develop normally. The others get a dose of male sex hormone every 24 hours for the rest of the course. Result? They're decanted as free martins. Structurally quite normal, except he had to admit that they do not just have, that they do have just the slightest tendency to grow beards. But sterile. Sterile means you can't reproduce. Guaranteed sterile, which brings us at last, continued Mr. Foster, out of the realm of mere slavish imitation of nature into a much more interesting world of human invention. He rubbed his hands, for of course they didn't content themselves with merely hatching out embryos. Any cow could do that. So to content yourself with something means to be satisfied with something. They didn't content themselves with merely just artificially producing people. They weren't just happy with artificially producing people. They wanted more than that. They wanted to do more. We also predestine and condition. We decant our babies as socialized human beings, as alphas or epsilons, as future sewage workers or future, he was going to say future world controllers, but correcting himself said future directors of hatcheries instead. The DHC acknowledged the compliment with a smile. They were passing meter 320 on rack 11. A young beta minus mechanic was busy with screwdriver and spanner on the blood surrogate pump of a passing bottle. The hum of the electric motor depended by fractions of a tone as he turned the nuts. Oh, nuts here, by the way. So they're talking about a beta mechanic, which means he's not a very important person. He's a beta, not an alpha. And he's got his tools, and he's turning nuts. These are nuts. The hum of the electric motor depended by fractions of a tone as he turned the nuts. Down, down, a final twist. A glance at the revolution counter, and he was done. He moved 2 paces down the line and began the same process on the next pump. Reducing the number of revolutions per minute, Mr. Foster explained, the surrogate goes round slower, therefore passes through the lung at long intervals, therefore gives the embryo less oxygen. Nothing like oxygen shortage for keeping an embryo below par. Par is like the standard. If something is subpar, it is below your standard, below your expectation. So he's saying if you reduce the oxygen, that's a good way to keep the embryos subpar, not very smart. Not very strong, not very smart. Make them weak. Make them subpar, below par. Again, he rubbed his hands. But why do you want to keep the embryo below par? Asked the ingenious student. Ass, said the director, breaking a long silence. Hasn't it occurred to you that an epsilon embryo must have an epsilon environment as well as an epsilon hereditary? So that's a very low person. That's, 5 or 6 letters down the Greek alphabet. The lower the caste, said Mr. Foster, the shorter the oxygen. The first organ affected was the brain. After that, the skeleton. At 70% of normal oxygen, you get dwarves. Dwarves are short people, very short people. At less than 70, you get eyeless monsters, who are no use at all, concluded Mr. Foster. Whereas, his voice became confidential and eager, if they could discover a technique for shortening the period of maturation, what a triumph! What a benefaction to society. Consider the horse. They considered it. Mature at 6, an elephant at 10. While at 13 a man is not yet sexually mature and is only full grown at 20. Hence, of course, the fruit of delayed development, the human intelligence. But in epsilon, said Mr. Foster very justly, we don't need human intelligence. Didn't need and didn't get it. But though the epsilon mind was mature at 10, the epsilon body was not fit to work till 18. Long years of superfluous, wasted immaturity. Superfluous means extra and unnecessary. Hadi says, I think by reading this book, one can start his own business of a hatchery. What kind of hatchery, Hadi? Chickens or people? I hope you say chickens. Long years of superfluous and wasted immaturity. If the physical development could be speeded up till it was quick, say, as a cow's, what an enormous saving to the community. Enormous, murmured the students. Mr. Foster's enthusiasm was infectious. He became rather technical, spoke of the abnormal endocrine coordination. Look at that. Hadi, you found the word endocrine before we even came up to it in the book. Endocrine coordination, which made men grow so slowly, postulated a germinal mutation to account for it. Could the effects of this germinal mutation be undone? Could the individual epsilon embryo be made a revert by the suitable technique to the normality of dogs and cows? That was the problem, and it was all but solved. Well, I'm hoping that, this first chapter is very difficult, but I'm hoping that this is kind of giving us the setup so that maybe in the next chapter we start to see more of this world outside of the laboratory, and it's not so technical, but then we understand the problems that are being faced in the street. Because now we understand that many of the people who are around are artificially created, and they're all created with a purpose, and they're all created in ranks. So you have the alpha and the beta. all the way down to, seems like the epsilon is the top of the hierarchy. Hadi says dwarf, Lilliputian. Okay, Lilliputian, that comes from a story about some very small people. And I know that they use that to mean dwarf in German because I had a German friend, and I happen to know that because she mentioned it. But dwarf would be more common in English. And if you say Lilliputian, maybe somebody who's educated on literature or who has a very large vocabulary would know that word, but I think most people in English wouldn't know what you're talking about. Pilkington at Mombasa had produced individuals who were sexually mature at 4, full grown at 6.5, a scientific triumph, but socially useless. 6-year-old men and women were too stupid to do even epsilon work, and the process was an all or nothing one. Either you failed to modify at all, or else you modified the whole way. They were still trying to find the ideal compromise between adults of 20 and adults of 6. So far without success. Mr. Foster sighed. That's a sigh. And shook his head. Their wanderings through the crimson light. Crimson is a type of red. It's kind of the color of blood. Their wanderings through the crimson twilight had brought them to the neighborhood of meter 170 on rack 9. From this point onwards, rack 9 was enclosed, and the bottles performed the remainder of their journey in a kind of tunnel, uninterrupted, here and there by openings 2 or 3 meters wide. Heat conditioning, said Mr. Foster. Hot tunnels alternated with cool tunnels. Cool tunnels was wedded to discomfort in the form of hard X-rays. By the time they were decanted... So I think here, when you decant something, you're taking it out. The embryos had a horror of cold. They were predestined to emigrate to the tropics, to be miners and acetate silk spinners and steel workers. Later on, their minds would be made to endorse the judgment of their bodies. We condition them to thrive on heat, concluded Mr. Foster. Our colleagues upstairs will teach them to love it. At that, put in the director sententiously, that is the secret of happiness and virtue. Liking what you've got to do. And conditioning aims at that. Hadi says mutation, rearrangement of genes and chromosomes. Well, mutation, usually when you're using that word, it means it's usually not used in a positive way. A mutant is something with unexpected features. So maybe the cause is because the genes are a little bit different. But when you're talking about mutant, you're kind of talking about the result, what you see or what you get. And it's unexpected. It's not normal. Usually mutant means something like not normal. So having a mutation almost always means something bad. And the reason is because maybe the genes were rearranged, or maybe they rearranged themselves, and the outcome is something different. Something not the same. And most of the time it's used in a bad way. If you're talking about science, mutation can be used just to mean a change that happens because the genes were rearranged. But in regular conversation, when you talk about a mutant or a mutation, it usually isn't in a good way. And that, put it in the director's sententiously, that is the secret of happiness and virtue. Liking what you've got to do. All conditioning aims at making people like their unescapable social destiny. In a gap between 2 tunnels, a nurse was delicately probing. Probing means like sticking something into something else. Was delicately probing with a long, fine syringe. Remember that needle that we showed earlier? That's a syringe. When the doctor gives you a shot, that's with a syringe. Into the gelatinous contents of a passing bottle. The students and their guides stood watching for her for a few moments, in silence. "Well, Lenina," said Mr. Foster, when at last she withdrew the syringe and straightened herself up. The girl turned with a start. We've already seen that in 1984. Start here does not mean begin. It means surprise. Huh? That's a start. She turned with a start. One could see that for all the lupus and purple eyes, she was uncommonly pretty. So all the people who work in this laboratory have lupus, which is a type of blood disease, but I didn't know that. I thought it was just a problem with your blood. I didn't know that it looked a certain way. Let's see. What happens if I looked for somebody with lupus? Oh. Well, I guess lupus makes your skin look something like this, just by Googling it. So it makes your face very red and pink. Probably very uncomfortable. The girl turned with a start. And we could see that for all the lupus and the purple eyes, she was uncommonly pretty. So she has this disease that's very unattractive, but she still looked very pretty. Stillwaters says, "Good night. Thanks for watching, Stillwaters. I hope you come back." Don't be too scared with all this technical language. I hope it's just the first chapter that's like this. See you next time. Thank you for watching. The girl turned with a start. One could see that for all the lupus and purple eyes, she was uncommonly pretty. "Henry!" Her smile flashed redly at him, a row of coral teeth. "Charming, charming," murmured the director, and giving her 2 or 3 little pats. Received in exchange a rather deferential smile to him. "What are you giving them?" asked Mr. Foster, making his tone very professional. "Oh, the usual, typhoid and sleeping sickness. Tropical workers start being inoculated at meter 150. Mr. Foster explained to the students the embryos still have gills. We immunize the fish against the future man's disease." Then turning back to Lenina, 10 to 15 on the roof this afternoon, he said, as usual. "Charming," said the director once more, with a final pat, and moved away after the others. How long is this? Okay, we've just got one more page, and then we're done. Yeah, because it's been over 2 hours now. It's been a long time. Let's see. On rack 10 rows of the next generation's chemical workers were being trained in the toleration of lead, caustic soda, tar, chlorine, the first of a batch of 250 embryonic rockets. Plane engineers was just passing the 1100-meter mark on rack 3. Hadi says, "Probing? Comb around?" Well, let's take a look at the difference between what a probe and a comb is, and then maybe it will make sense to you. Here's a probe. So a probe is usually just one long thing, and it's used for inserting. So if you're probing something, you're doing this. And actually, you know, if the doctors put a camera inside you, they call that probing, because, you know, you move the probe around like this. This is probing. So if you're probing for something, that means you're looking for something, but you're looking for one specific thing. But now let's take a look at what a comb is. These are combs. So, a probe can only go in one place, follow one path, but a comb can go everywhere. So if you're combing around for something, maybe you're looking for something, but you're doing it in a different way than a probe. A probe, you're looking directly for something. You have a goal, you have a destination. But with a comb, you're just looking everywhere. And that would be the difference. So they could be similar. You could use both of them to mean looking for something, but it means looking for something in a particular way. Probing is a very precise thing, a very exact thing, and combing is very chaotic. The first batch of 250 embryonic rocket plane engineers was just passing the 1100-meter mark on Rack 3. A special mechanism kept their containers in constant rotation. To improve their sense of balance, Mr. Foster explained, doing repairs on the outside of a rocket in mid-air is a ticklish job. Well, tickle, that's tickle, 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 tickle. So if you do that to me, tickle, 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 I say, stop it, I'm ticklish. That means I'm very weak to tickles. I'm very sensitive to tickles. It's funny that he's saying it's a ticklish job. I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. Maybe he means you have to be very careful or maybe immune to tickles. I don't know. I don't know what he means by ticklish job. We slacken off the circulation when they're right way up, so that they're half starved, double the flow of surrogate when they're upside down. They learn to associate topsy-turvy with well-being. Topsy-turvy is an expression that means things are turning from right side up to upside down. Very unstable. Usually when you're talking about topsy-turvy, something is very unstable. I live a very topsy-turvy life. That means there's a lot of chaos in my life, a lot of instability in my life. If you're working on a rocket, that would be very topsy-turvy, very unstable. They learn to associate topsy-turvydom with well-being. In fact, they're only truly happy when they're standing on their heads. And now, Mr. Foster went on, I'd like to show you some very interesting conditioning for Alpha Plus intellectuals. We have a big batch of them on Rack 5, first gallery level. He called to two boys who had started to go down to the ground. They're round about meter 19, he explained. You can't really do anything useful intellectual conditioning till the fetuses have lost their toenails. Follow me. But the director had looked at his watch, 10 to 3. He said, no time for the intellectual embryos, I'm afraid. We must go up to the nurseries before the children have finished their afternoon sleep. Mr. Foster was disappointed. At least one glance at the decanting room, he pleaded. Very well, then, the director smiled indulgently. Just one glance. Okay. Well, that was chapter 1 of A Brave New World. I hope that you'll come back for chapter 2. The language was pretty complicated, but I think that's because we were in a laboratory. But anyway, if you're learning English for school or work and you're a doctor, I guess you learned some interesting words today. All right. Well, thank you for watching, and I will be doing chapter 2 very soon of A Brave New World. Goodbye.